Today's presentation is called Job Loss and Your Head. And for this presentation, I am drawing heavily from one of the best job search books I ever read. I don't know that it's even in print anymore. This is an old book. It's called When Smart People Fail. And it was written back in the 80s. I know some of you weren't born yet. I don't care to hear that. But it was written by two women. One was an executive on the West Coast, one was an executive on the East Coast, and they both found themselves laid off during that horrible recession that happened at the late 80s. And for both of them, that termination was absolutely devastating. It was emotionally wrenching. And they eventually met each other and decided to collaborate on this book. And they were talking about how unemployment had affected them in so many different aspects of their life. And they decided to interview 176 people about, tell me about a time when you lost your job. How did it impact your family? What were the emotions that you went through? How did it turn out to be a good thing, or was it a life-changing thing in a negative way? Just interviewing them and finding out what went through their minds. And to a person, when they lost their jobs, they defined themselves as failures. I tell people all the time in my classes, I teach job search skill classes at the Workforce Solutions office, and I tell people all the time that looking for a job is like looking for a spouse. And believe me, there are a gazillion similarities between those two things. In both cases, you are looking for a long-term relationship that is mutually beneficial. If you lose, if you had a job that was the perfect job, it was your dream job, you were so happy you wanted to stay there for the rest of your life, and you lose that job, it's very similar emotionally, I believe, to being widowed. You had a wonderful marriage, and it ended, and now that becomes the standard for all of your future relationships. And a perfect job becomes the standard for all your future jobs. Do I like the people as much as the other job? Is it as fulfilling? Does it pay as well? Is it the environment as good? If, on the other hand, you were laid off, or even worse, if you were fired, emotionally, I think it's very similar to being divorced, because you were rejected and other people were retained. And in that case, very often it's like you have failed. And your marriage has failed. For any of you who have had a long-term relationship or a marriage where it ended in divorce, there is an element of I couldn't make it work. It was a failure, and I really wanted it to be forever and ever, till death do us part, and I failed in that endeavor. And so lots of times when you lose a job, even when you know intellectually it's not your fault. It's not your fault that they moved the whole department to Asia or whatever, or the company went out of business, or whatever the reason was. Sometimes with some people, in the very back of their mind, they feel as though they failed. They should have done better. They should have worked harder. They should have been smarter. They should have volunteered. They should have taken that overseas offer, whatever. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that impression and emotionally what goes through your head when you lose a job. This is not going to be depressing, though. I think you're thinking it already is going to be depressing. Okay, it's going to be a little depressing, but mostly it's not going to be depressing, because I don't go there. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. But on the other hand, I think it is helpful not to just shove all of those emotions under the carpet and not acknowledge them and not realize that they're there. In fact, this was made very clear to me in, let me think which class it was. I think it was the Monday morning class, which is on planning. So the Monday morning class is called planning, and it's all about how do you get started in your job search. What's the first thing you do? What's the next thing you do? And we go through how do you inventory your skills. How do you know what transferable skills you have? How do you analyze your experience, your training, your personal attributes? We talk about 10 things that you need to either create, do, think about, go to, whatever, before you start your job search. How do you structure a successful job search day? I mean, it's a lot of information. And in that class was one of my long ago job seekers who has, she's gone through all my programs and unemployment twice at least, and now she is starting her own business. And she said she just needed to get out of the house and kind of re-anchor what she's doing and where she's going, get new direction. And she is one of the most intelligent and successful job seekers I have ever known. She has been successful in creating jobs. She has been successful in, during an informational interview, talking an employer into hiring her by showing them what she could do to help their business. She's really smart about the job search process. And she said to the group, listen, because I kept referring to her as this really successful job seeker, and she said, I just want to tell all of you, this didn't happen immediately. This didn't happen immediately. I wasn't capable of doing this from the very beginning. I had to work on my own head first. I had to figure out what I wanted to do, get some direction, and sometimes I just had to back away from it because it was too much. It was too much. And that brings me to this. I know you've all been wondering, unless you've been through my classes, in which case you know exactly what this is all about. This represents your brain when you very first get laid off or terminated. Immediately you get that word that you don't have a job, this becomes your brain. It fills up immediately with all kinds of emotional baggage. And it's all of the emotions that are affiliated with the job search, with being unemployed. So what's going on in your head? These are just some of the emotions that come into your brain. Shock. And the amount of shock that you feel is directly proportional to how long you were at a job. I had a man who said he was at IBM for 29 years, 10 months, and 13 days. Never entered his mind that he would not be at IBM for that 30-year milestone. And then they give him a pink slip, and it's like, what is this all about? I had a person who was an executive at Dell, went through Launchpad. He got his layoff notice by phone, and he said, there's some mistake. I've got my tickets. I leave in the morning for China. I'm supposed to represent Dell at a big meeting. And they said, no, you're laid off. And he said, you check your information. I can't imagine that they would lay me off before this important meeting. And they checked the information. He's laid off. It's like, who's making these decisions? But there certainly is a great deal of shock. There's some people are just devastated. They're angry. They're looking for people to blame for making that stupid decision when you were a key performer. In this book, they tell about a lady who had just, she was a senior executive with a company. She had just had a huge coup where she had, I don't even know what it was, brought in a major contract or something like that. She went in to ask her boss for a raise based on that success, and he fired her. And it's like, what? She couldn't even wrap her mind around what had happened. Sometimes, you know, the shock, it's just, there's no reason for it. Blame, eventually, sometimes people are ashamed of being unemployed. That absolutely should not happen. All of you have heard about the times in Japan when for the first time people did not have a job for life and they were laid off, and they felt such a humiliation that they dressed up in a suit and left home every day and sat in the park all day because they didn't want to tell their families that they didn't have a job. It was too humiliating. There's no place for that. You can see the caliber of people that no longer are working. We've had executives, we've had C-level people, we've had business owners, presidents of companies, We've got some of those same people with those high-level titles sitting in this room right now. Sometimes it's like, who's running Austin if you have people at this level with this amount of skill and education who are laid off from a company? It's mind-boggling. Despair, sometimes that happens. Fear, betrayal, but some people look on unemployment with a great deal of hope. Maybe they hadn't had fun at their last job for a long time, and they're thinking the next one is going to be better. It couldn't be worse. I hated that job. So the next one's going to be better. They're hopeful. They look on it as an opportunity. So there's this huge mix, and we're going to, one of the slides talks about the progression, the stages of emotion, and it's the same ones to a death, to a death or any kind of a devastating experience where you have shock, you have anger and blame, you eventually there's despair at the very end of it, and finally acceptance and so forth. It's that whole progression. And sometimes people will say, well, thank goodness I'm in anger. I only have 2 more stages to go and I'm going to feel better. But it doesn't go linearly. It's like a soup, and different emotions will bubble up, and the ones that you think you have already, gotten rid of, and then you get a bill in the mail that you'd forgotten you had, and it's like, whoa, fear comes out again. And so it's this huge emotional thing. Some days you're feeling great. You're feeling positive and optimistic and hopeful. And the next day, I don't know, biorhythms kick in and you're down in the dumps and you're terrified and desperate. So this is it. This is it. And the problem with this big old emotional mess that you have to deal with is that it impedes your ability to make decisions. The more stress you're under, the more things going on in your head, the harder it is for you to make decisions. And when you're unemployed, you got to make a lot of decisions. Do you want to continue in the same job that you had before, or do you want to start something new? Should you go to school? Should you sell your house? Should you move in with your mama? One of the people we're going to talk about is William Shirer, who wrote Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And when he got fired for the first time, he was fired several times. When he got fired for the first time, he moved to Spain. He lived there a year. I think back then, it was a long time ago, I think he lived for a year in Spain for $1,000. And he waited for everything to kind of clear out, and then he came back to the U.S. and got a job with CBS. And so anyway, what are you going to do? This is the brain that you have to work with, and it's tough. And what we hope you'll be able to figure out eventually is how to see through all of this, and how to see very clearly where you're going to go, how you're going to get there. It's also just fun to be in here. But the green ones glow in the dark, which is way cool. Way cool. In our old office, which maybe we'll have time to tell you about, this used to hang above my desk on a bungee cord. So, number one, I felt extremely important. And number two, you could always find me because I was the only one sitting under a big purple thing. But when we moved into the office down on Airport Boulevard, my site manager had a conversation with me. We'll call it a conversation. And explained that this is a grown-up office, Kathy. And we will not be hanging things from the ceiling in this office. Okay, fine. All right, what's going on? A lot of emotions. Job loss, if you think about it this way, job loss is just an event. It is something that has happened to you. And considering it a failure, or whatever else you consider it, is just how you view that event. But really, when you think about it, it's just an event. It can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. You're the one that controls how you view it. Now, I will say this, and you hear this all the time, that people say you can't control what happens to you, but you have total control over how you react to what happens to you. So I have been really devastated, upset, sad, whatever. One time in my life, I've really been blessed that it's only been one time. And I was all emotionally distraught. And somebody threw that line at me, and I would have just done one of those if I could have, because I'm not, you think I want this? You think I'm controlling this? I don't want this. But I don't know that we exactly have control over how we react to things. I didn't have control over it. And when people said, well, just cheer up, you control that. And I'm like, I don't think so. I have not chosen this. So, but philosophically, it's true. It's just, there's too much emotion it overrides your brain sometimes, and you can't control it. Failure, when you consider yourself or an event or whatever to be a failure, it usually is because you've had a loss of either self-esteem or money or social status, depending on how important those things are to you. And of course, with job loss, it's all three of those. Sometimes people don't care that much about money. You have to have a modicum of money. You have to have some money. You have to survive. But money is not their driving sort of impetus. It's not what they live for. On the other hand, some of you having that big salary, that's a big deal. And you're all about that. And it's not like one's right and one's wrong. It's just that when you lose something, it's like, how important is that to you? And the same thing happens with a divorce, does it not? In some cases, my parents were divorced when I was little, and you can tell by looking at me, that was in an era where people didn't get divorced. My grandmother was divorced, so we go way back with broken marriages. But it was a stigma. In my school for a while, my family was the only one that was divorced. Nobody else was divorced. And it's like, I was their token divorced person that they knew, the only person that came from a broken family. Today, 50% of marriages end in divorce. But back then, there was a stigma attached to it. There was a little bit of, I don't know, it didn't bother me, but there was that shame and humiliation if you came from a broken family. If you couldn't make it work, what's your problem? And certainly if you lose an income, there's that money thing as well. And in some cases, it's social status when you lose that partner. So, if that's failure, then what is success? Is success an increase in all of those things? When you lose a job, in some cases, you gain self-esteem. Let's say that you were in a job where you were bullied, and you were demeaned, and you were humiliated. And I talk to people like that all the time. And so when that job ends, woohoo! Suddenly, you are proud. You have more self-esteem. It turns out to be a better situation for you. You have independence. You may not have money, but you have independence. You have freedom. You can do what you want to do. You're not tied to that job. Sometimes if the job was very stressful, you have more peace in your life. And you certainly have opportunity. You have an opportunity to do what you want to do. You have an opportunity to get something better. You have an opportunity to change careers. You have an opportunity to start your own business. You have an opportunity to move, to relocate. You're not tied to that job. And so there are things that open for you even while those other doors have closed. The stages of reaction to a job loss or a failure, obviously shock. We've talked about that. When I lost my job, my only reaction was fear. I really didn't have all the rest of that stuff. I was just terrified. And I kept thinking, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to feed my kids? What do they take my car? There's no mass transit in East Texas. I'm not back to get me. It's going to smell bad. The person was going to hire me. And your mind just goes tick, tick, tick from one scary scenario to another. Very scary, especially if you're the job seeker. I mean, the breadwinner. You are the job seeker, but you're also some of you the breadwinner. So it is pretty scary. Anger, blame, shame, despair, all of those. Why did it happen? What happened? According to the book, and according to the 176 interviews that they conducted, if somebody was terminated, this is not a layoff, this is if you were terminated, if you were fired, often it was because you had poor interpersonal skills. Look at Steve Jobs. One of the most successful entrepreneurs in all of American history, perhaps the best. And yet he was fired from the company that he started because there were so many interpersonal problems. He was a difficult person to work for. There's a new documentary and a book that's just got in the theaters today. I heard it reviewed this morning. And they interviewed one of his engineers, one of the key people that worked with Steve Jobs. And he was emotional even talking about it today, because he said how it was invigorating to work with Steve Jobs because he was such a genius. But they said either he was harassing you, or he was inspiring you, or he was oblivious to you. And this guy said he lost his wife, he lost his children because of that job that he had. It was so intense. It was so intense. And so Steve had to go, poor interpersonal skills. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's the wrong fit. It has nothing to do with you. It's not your fault. You shouldn't have been there in the first place. That marriage was annulled because it was the wrong fit from the get-go. Sometimes it's the wrong fit because it's just the wrong environment for you. It's a startup, and you can't work in a startup. It's too high risk. It's too intense. They don't have any records. They're all in a shoebox under somebody's desk. You need a mature company. That's the wrong business environment for you. So I work in a place that's the wrong business environment for me, but I've worked there for a long time. So my personality would make me a good fit for a startup expanding company. And I've worked for the state for 40 years. You don't get any more, I don't know, clogged up than the state. And so my personnel file reflects the fact that it's a bad fit for me. I'll have an award and 2 disciplinary write-ups, and an award and 3 write-ups and a probation and an award. It's not a good fit. But I'm so old now that they don't know what to do with me. So there I am. I'm still there. It's the wrong value system. These people we've heard different people talk about, I want to do something that's good. I want to help people. I want to be in that kind of environment. And you're working for a company that all they care about is sticking it to the competition. It's the wrong value system. Wrong coworkers. They're all. I have a friend who was a consultant with a company. She was supposed to come in and help these people in this company work more effectively as a team. And she said she had never been in a more toxic, hateful environment. When she was interviewing people individually, they talked about how they wanted to kill somebody that they worked with. They slit their tires. They harassed them. And she's supposed to pull them together and make happy. And she said it was one of the greatest successes of her life. She said, I never got them to where they liked each other. But she said, as I left, what I was able to do was affect a successful, civilized, working relationship. Sometimes your coworkers are just the wrong people for you and the wrong job. Sometimes you apply for a job and it sounds as though it's going to be a good fit, and you get there and it's not as advertised. It was false advertising, or you think you're going to be good at it and you're not. It's just the wrong fit. So it's not necessarily your fault. Lack of commitment, that's another reason that sometimes people get terminated. Sometimes it's just bad luck. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Bad luck can come with the hiring situation and with the termination. Years ago, I had an employer who said, that person you sent me, perfect. I need exactly that skill set. You nailed it. That was the perfect person, but I need somebody else just like her. And I'm like, well, why didn't you hire her? Just hire her. What is the deal? And didn't want to tell me for a long time. We went round and round. How can I send you the right person if you won't tell me what was wrong with that person? And he finally admitted that she just reminded him too much of his ex-wife. He said, I can't work with her. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't her fault. That's what we assigned to. That was bad luck. That job wasn't to be. And Christina, the girl the director of human resources, she told us that she had 7 interviews with the city. And the city is a great employer, really good benefits. You get vested into retirement early on. And each department has its own HR department. And I think that's what she probably meant. But she had 7 interviews, each one on a Saturday, and each one 2 or 3 hours. And they still, nobody had offered her a job. She was still in the running. She was still being interviewed by other places, but nobody had offered her a job. And then she did get an offer with a state agency. She said it was a good job, but not much money. The state doesn't pay very much, usually. And so it can be considered bad luck that she was 4.5 months with nothing, getting really nervous, her money's running out. She said she was volunteering like a banshee, doing everything she could. And then the perfect job contacted her. 1 interview, she negotiated a fabulous salary, more than she had made at her last job. The perfect job, the perfect title, the perfect place, everything is great. Sometimes you think it's bad luck, you're not getting something, but it's because it's not right for you and the right one is still out there. You cannot lose hope because you have to keep playing this game because the right one is still out there. And so there is that. And then obviously some people get terminated because of discrimination, because they think you're too old. You don't get hired because of that. Sometimes people don't get hired because they're too young. Ageism can go both directions. Racism continues to rear its ugly head in every aspect of our world. I don't know how to conquer that. And sexism, it's here, especially in technology. I think people have a harder time. Reframe. See if you can look at things in a different way. The guy, what's his first name? His last name is Hoffman. He's the guy that started LinkedIn. He spent most of his career in academia, and then he decided he wanted to go into technology. He had no technical skills, and ended up getting a sales job at Apple. That was going to be where he got those skills, and eventually became a product manager. But he started a little social connection kind of group, and he started it and never said it failed. Never ever did he say it failed. He said, I had that group, left Apple, I started that company and ran it for 2 years. And it ended, he said that company ended, but oh my gosh, did I learn a lot. And everything he learned from that company, he was able to apply later to LinkedIn, which became an enormous success for him, of course. But he never said, yeah, I started this social media place and it failed. No, it wasn't a failure. It was graduate school. It was where he learned what he needed to know in order to do better at the next one. And so you just reframe it. They talk in here about a lady who tried to start a magazine, a publishing thing, and she needed to get a loan, and if she got that loan, she was going to be it was going to be a success, and if not, her magazine was not going to be able to continue, it was going to go out of business. And so she did not get the loan, and the magazine was about to go under. It was on life support, and then just at that point, somebody else. So she said that wasn't a failure. I didn't look on it as a failure. It was just an event. It was just something that happened. And I was prepared to move on when somebody else suddenly contacted her and said, look, I like your publication. I'm going to invest in it. Kept it going for another 2 years. And then it failed. She never looked on it like that. It was just another event. But we were very successful for 2 years. We had all these things happen. We had a following. We had good reviews. It was very successful. But now she had no more income. And then one of the places that she had tried to get money from way earlier said, look, we like you so much and we like what you did with your publication. We want to hire you to be our vice president. So it all worked out successfully. It's just you don't look on it as a failure. You don't look on it as the end of something. You look on it as a transition to the next thing. A wonderful metaphor for where all of you are is you're all hermit crabs. Okay, there's a point to this. Okay, you're all hermit crabs. You were in a shell, and you got too big for the shell, and you had to move. You had to find another shell. You were feeling very safe and secure in that shell, right? That was your last job. And now you're exposed. You're vulnerable. You're in a weakened condition because you don't have that security. But you're on the hunt for that bigger shell. And when you find it, then not only are you going to be safe and secure, but you're going to have room to grow. And you're going to do fabulous things, because that's going to be the next step in your career. So it's the transition piece is scary, but it's just reframe it. You're just on the search for the next great opportunity. I'm going to read you just a couple little quotes from this book because I like them so much. So this guy named Dan, he was a gentle Greenwich Village composer who suffered a double loss, the breakup of a long-standing love affair and savage reviews of a concert of his music. He discovered the healing power of activity quite by accident. So one of the things that they say is if you're in the throes of this, get busy and reach out to other people. Do not try to do this by yourself. Looking for a job is too scary to do alone. He said, I was walking down the street, not able to talk to anybody, when I happened to pass Crazy Andrew. This is in New York City. There are lots of Crazy Andrews in New York City. I've lived there. A neighborhood character that I had nodded to a few times, but never really even talked to. He was just kind of one of these lunatics. He had a great shock of gray hair and a wonderful beard, and he was as wacky as a flock of very wise loony birds. He took one look at me and he said, we have to talk. Something is terribly wrong with you. Crazy Andrew knows. He made me tell him what happened, and then he just took charge. And first he said, you can call me anytime, 24 hours a day, and if I don't hear from you at least every 2 days, I'm calling you. So we went like that, day by day for a few weeks. And then Crazy Andrew said, okay, now I'm going to give you a project, and you must do it. Paint your house. You're going to change your environment. You're going to give yourself a present. You're going to paint your house any color. He smiled crazily at me at this point and said, I suggest black myself. Well, I didn't use black, but I did paint. From morning to night, I scraped and plastered and painted and blotted out everything from my mind except the task of painting. In the morning, there was an ugly chipped wall, and by noon, there was a smooth, completed surface. I realized later how wise Crazy Andrew was. He had given me exactly what I needed, an activity to fill up the time, and time is really the only buffer between the hurt and the healing. And this is the one who tried to launch her magazine, and they said, does she consider it a failure? She said, I consider my 2 years like time an athlete spends training. I became strong because I refused to see things as barriers. I chose to regard them merely as hurdles to overcome. Maintaining the illusion of success when I had no income allowed me to expand a network of contacts and allowed people to call me. In retrospect, everything I learned has made me capable of taking this new job as a vice president. And if you can reframe it successfully and look on it as something else, I think that's very helpful. I heard an interview with Danny DeVito on radio one time. Does everybody know who Danny DeVito is? Everybody? Okay. So he's an actor. And the interviewer was trying to get him to talk about despair, about times before he became successful when he was really down in the dumps. And they said, tell me about the hard times. And he said, you know, I don't really think I had any hard times. And they said, Danny, isn't it true that you were homeless, that you lived on the subway? And he said, oh yeah, but those weren't hard times. And he said, oh, no. He said, that was my training. He said, how are you going to be an actor if you haven't exposed yourself to lots of different kinds of people? So he said, I rode the subway all the time. Like 24 hours a day, I was on the subway, and I was watching people, and I was taking notes, and I was looking at the way they moved, and I was looking at their facial expressions. And he said, I was studying. Yeah, I never considered that to be a hard time. That was school for me, and I didn't have to pay for it, except for just the tokens, you know? And so it's how do you frame what you're going through? Frame it in the most positive way you can. And there are opportunities for training, there's opportunities for volunteering, there's opportunities for connecting with people, there's opportunities for learning from each other and helping each other all along the way. And so don't squander those. Take advantage of them.